That winter hit harder than any I'd seen in my 38 years on this earth. The wind came down from the mountains like a pack of wolves, howling through the cottonwoods and scraping the last warmth out of the valley. Snow didn't fall. It tore through the air sideways, sharp enough to sting through a man's coat. The kind of cold that makes the bones ache and the horses stop trusting your judgment. Folks in town said the storm would pass by midnight, but out there on Widow's Pass, the sky looked like it meant to swallow everything whole. I was heading back from a freight job near Red Bluff, trying to get home before the storm shut the trail. My boy Tommy was riding with me, wrapped up in a wool blanket so deep you could barely see his nose. He was only 8, but tough, like his ma had been. I kept talking to him over my shoulder just to hear my own voice against the wind. It didn't matter what I said. It was the sound that kept us both believing we weren't the last souls left alive in that white hell. We'd gone maybe another mile when my horse slowed and snorted, ears twitching. Something lay ahead in the drift, just a dark shape half buried. At first, I thought it was a dead calf, or maybe a saddlebag blown loose. But then I saw a hand, a pale, still hand poking out of the snow. I jumped off before the horse even stopped moving. The wind near took the breath out of me when I bent down. She was a woman, face covered in frost, skin like paper. Her hair had turned to ice where it stuck to her cheek. I brushed the snow from her lips and felt for breath. Nothing at first, then barely a whisper of air, thin and trembling. "Tommy," I shouted, "hand me that blanket, quick now." He did without a word. He'd seen death before when his ma went. He knew better than to ask questions. I wrapped the woman up and lifted her onto the saddle. She was lighter than she looked. For a moment, I wondered how she'd ended up alone out there. No horse, no tracks I could see, but thinking wouldn't keep her alive. We rode through the storm for what felt like hours, following the faint shape of the trail. My cabin sat tucked behind a ridge near a frozen creek. When we finally reached it, I could barely feel my hands. I kicked the door open, carried her inside, and laid her near the hearth. Tommy threw wood into the stove, and the first crackle of flame sounded like salvation. I peeled off her gloves. Her fingers were white, nails blue. I took her boots off and rubbed her feet slow and steady. I learned long ago that sometimes saving a life ain't about speed. It's about patience. Her lips moved once, maybe trying to say something, but no sound came out. I gave her a sip of warm water, then wrapped her tighter in the blanket. When she started shivering, I knew that was a good sign. Shivering meant life was still in her. Tommy watched from the corner, eyes wide. "Is she gonna die, Pa?" he asked. "Not if I can help it," I told him. "Now fetch another log." He did, and I could see the fear leave his little face just a bit. Maybe he believed that as long as I kept talking, everything would be all right. Truth was, I wasn't sure. I'd seen men stronger than her freeze to death a dozen steps from a fire, but I wasn't about to let that happen under my roof. Hours passed. The storm outside roared like Judgment Day, rattling the shutters and howling down the chimney. Inside, the fire threw gold light across her face. It was the first time I really looked at her. She was young, maybe 30, with fine features, too fine for a woman of the trail. Her coat was good wool, lined with fur, buttons polished, not the kind of thing a ranch hand's wife would own. I noticed a ring on her glove chain, gold with a small ruby, the kind of jewelry you see once a year. maybe at church or a county ball. When dawn finally broke, the storm had buried the world. Snow piled against the door near to the handle. I fed the fire and checked on her again. She was breathing easier now, skin flushed instead of ghost white. When I touched her forehead, it was warm. She stirred, eyes fluttering open just a crack. Where am I? She whispered. You're safe, I said. Cabin up near Widow's Pass. Found you out cold in the storm. She looked around disoriented. You brought me here? Didn't see anyone else riding by, I answered. Seemed like the right thing to do. Her gaze settled on Tommy, then back at me. You and your boy saved my life. I shrugged. Just did what any man ought to. She tried to sit up, but I pressed her shoulder lightly. Rest easy. You took quite a beating out there. There was something about her voice, soft but strong, like someone used to being obeyed but not thanked. I didn't ask her name, and she didn't offer it. Out here names weren't as important as fire and water. What mattered was she was breathing. Over the next day, she started to come back to life. Tommy took to her quick, asking a dozen questions I told him not to. She smiled at him in that patient way only women seem to manage. When she laughed, it was quiet, careful, like she'd forgotten how for a long while. I caught her watching me sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking, maybe wondering what kind of fool hauls a stranger out of a blizzard without knowing who she is. By the second night, the storm had moved east. The stars came out sharp and cold, and the silence after all that wind felt holy. I sat by the fire sharpening my knife while she sipped broth from a tin cup. You'll be able to travel soon, I told her. Weather's breaking. She nodded slowly. I can't thank you enough. Don't need thanks, ma'am. Just glad you're still breathing. She looked at me for a long moment, as if she wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. Finally, she said, You're a good man, Mr. Dalton. I said, Jesse Dalton. I won't forget that name, she whispered. Next morning, when I woke, she was gone, left before dawn, quiet as fallen snow. On the table, she'd set a silver brooch shaped like a horse. No note, no word of where she went. Just that small piece of shine catching the morning light. I stared at it a long time, feeling something strange in my chest, part loss, part peace. I didn't know who she was or why she'd been out there in the storm, but I had a feeling I hadn't seen the last of her. Out here in the West, paths cross again when they're meant to. And sometimes, mercy you give without thinking finds its way back in a form you never expect. A week went by after she left, and the snow started to melt off the ridge. The creeks came alive again, murmuring under the ice like they were waking from a long sleep. Life out there didn't give a man much time to dwell on what was gone. Cattle still needed feeding, fences needed mending, and my boy still asked for breakfast before dawn. But every now and then, when I walked past the table, my eyes went to that silver brooch glinting in the morning light. I kept telling myself it didn't mean anything, just a token from someone passing through. Still, I didn't throw it in a drawer. It stayed there, right in the open, like it was waiting for something. Tommy brought it up first. You think she'll come back, Pa? I shook my head. Storm like that changes folks. Maybe she's got kin down south. Maybe she was heading to town and never meant to stay. He frowned. But she didn't say goodbye. No, son. Some people carry goodbyes heavy. Best they leave before they have to say it. That seemed to settle it for him. but not for me. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the rafters, listening to the wind ease through the cracks, wondering what kind of world she came from. There was something about the way she spoke, the calm under her words, that didn't fit with the rough edges of the frontier. Maybe she was a widow. Maybe she lost more than she cared to say. I stopped myself from spinning stories, but the mind does what it wants when the nights are long. Then came the morning that changed everything. I was chopping wood behind the cabin when I heard a rider. Not many folks came up that far into Widow's Pass unless they had a reason. The horse sounded tired but steady, hooves crunching through the thawing snow. Tommy ran out to see. "Pa, someone's coming." I wiped the sweat from my brow, set the axe down, and watched a young rider approach, barely more than a boy himself, with a messenger's satchel slung across his chest. He reined in his horse and called out, "Mr. Jesse Dalton." "That's me," I said. He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, sealed in dark red wax. "Yeah, got a letter for you, sir. Came down from the Merrick Company line. Said to deliver it personal." I stared at that seal. The wax was stamped with a crest, a horse's head framed by laurel leaves. Fancy, like something out of a banker's office, not the sort of mail that ever found its way to my door. I nodded and handed the boy a coin. "Much obliged." He tipped his hat and rode off, eager to get back to the main road. I stood there a long minute, feeling the weight of that envelope like it was made of lead. Finally, I went inside. Tommy hovered near the table as I broke the seal. The paper was thick, smooth, smelled faintly of lavender. The handwriting was neat and strong. "Mr. Dalton, I hope this letter finds you and your son well. You once offered kindness without condition to a stranger in need. I have not forgotten it. My name is Catherine Merrick. I am the owner of the Merrick Cattle Company out of Silver Ridge. I would like to extend a formal offer of employment. Foreman's pay, $120 a month, lodging provided, schooling for your boy included. The work is steady, and the ranch needs men of integrity. You fit that measure. If you choose to accept, report to the Silver Ridge main house by the 1st of next month. You'll find the gates open. With respect, Catherine Merrick." I read it twice, then a third time. My hands felt rough against that fine paper. Tommy was watching me, eyes wide. "Pa, what's it say?" "It says," I muttered, "No, we got ourselves an offer." "From who?" I folded the letter and stared into the fire. "From that woman we saved." His jaw dropped. "And Mom, she's rich?" "Seems so." Tommy bounced on his heels. "Can we go, Pa? We could have a big house, and I could go to school." I wanted to tell him not to get his hopes up, but the words wouldn't come. That kind of excitement doesn't visit a boy like him often. I rubbed my neck, trying to think it through. I'd worked ranches before, some good, some that broke a man's back for less than $1 a day. But this was something else. A woman running a cattle company the size of Merrick's was near unheard of, and to offer a stranger a job like that, it didn't sit square. Still, the thought of steady pay and a roof that didn't leak was hard to turn down. That night, I sat by the fire, letter in hand, staring at the flickering light on the wax seal. I thought about Catherine Merrick, the way her voice trembled when she came to, the calm she wore like armor, the look she gave me before she left. I didn't understand her world, but she had seen mine. Maybe that counted for something. Tommy fell asleep on the floor beside the stove, curled up with a book that had half its pages missing. I watched him and thought about what kind of life he might have in Silver Ridge. A school, other children, books that weren't torn and smoke-stained. I thought about what my late wife would have said. Probably that I was a fool for even hesitating. Before turning in, I took the brooch from the table and set it on top of the letter. The firelight danced across the silver horse's head and the red seal, and I felt something shift inside me, a tug between fear and hope. I'd lived most of my life making do, expecting little and taking less. Maybe it was time to want something again. The next morning, I saddled up before sunrise and rode into town. I didn't tell Tommy why. Needed to see the post clerk, find out if the offer was real or some cruel trick. The clerk, old Henson, looked at the letter and whistled low. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "That there's Catherine Merrick's hand. No doubt about it. Runs half the cattle in the territory. Tough woman. Folks say she built that empire after her father died. Who took on men twice her size and never flinched." "So it's real," I said. "Real as taxes," Henson grinned. "You planning to take it?" I folded the letter back into my coat. "Haven't decided." He leaned forward. "You'd be a fool not to. Merrick pays fair, keeps her people fed. Hard woman, but fair." On the ride home, the sky was bright and cold, sun glinting off the snow fields. The world felt different, like it was holding its breath. I'd spent so long believing the West didn't owe me a damn thing. Now it was offering me a chance, and I didn't know whether to grab it or walk away. When I got back, Tommy was waiting by the door, face red from the wind. "Pa, are we going?" I looked at him, at the cabin, at the hills that had been home for near 10 years. My life fit inside those walls, every scar and memory carved into the wood. But life ain't meant to be lived standing still. I ruffled his hair and said, "Pack your things, boy. We're heading to Silver Ridge." He whooped loud enough to startle the horses, and for the first time in a long while, I laughed too. Not because I knew what was coming, but because something in me had finally decided to move. We left Widow's Pass 3 days later. The snow still thick in the shadows, but the sun warm enough to promise spring. I loaded our wagon with what little we owned. 2 bedrolls, a crate of tools, some flour, coffee, and a tin box full of keepsakes my wife left behind. Tommy tucked his few books under his coat, the corners frayed from years of use. He was smiling more than I'd seen since she died, humming a tune his mother used to sing when the wind came soft through the cottonwoods. That sound carried me further than any trail ever could. The road to Silver Ridge cut through open country, rolling plains, sagebrush, and stretches of frozen river that caught the light like glass. We traveled slow, stopping to water the horses and warm our hands. Most nights we camped beneath the stars, fire crackling low, Tommy asleep against my shoulder. There was peace in those hours, the kind that comes before you know what's waiting ahead. I didn't say much, but inside I felt the pull of something I couldn't name, hope maybe, or just the ache of change. On the 5th morning, we saw the first sign of Merrick land, a long fence line running to the horizon, marked with an iron M on every post. It stretched further than any ranch I'd worked. The boards were new, straight as a ruler, and I knew right then this was no small outfit. Whoever ran this place didn't just own land, they commanded it. We passed a few riders along the road, hands driving cattle east. They tipped their hats polite enough, though I caught the way they looked at us, a dusty man and his boy rolling up with a wagon older than both horses combined. They probably wondered what business we had near Silver Ridge. Truth was, I wasn't sure myself. By sundown, the ridge came into view, broad hills fading to copper under the dying light, and beyond them a cluster of white buildings shining against the dark earth. That was the Merrick Ranch. I could see windmills turning slow, smoke curling from chimneys, and the faint echo of hammers from the far corral. It looked less like a ranch and more like a small town built on cattle and hard work. We stopped a mile out. I needed a moment. The air smelled of mesquite and horses, the kind of scent that carried stories, sweat, leather, iron, and ambition. Now, Tommy leaned forward, eyes wide. "That's it, ain't it, Pa?" "That's it," I said quietly. "Silver Ridge." He grinned. "Looks big enough for 100 of our cabins. Maybe more." We rolled on. The main gate was tall, built of oak and iron. A man in a long coat stepped out to meet us, rifle slung easy, but not hidden. His face was hard, sun-cut, the kind you see leading cattle drives or garden payrolls. "Can I help you, mister?" "Name's Jesse Dalton," I said. "I got a letter from Miss Merrick. Said to report by the first." He eyed me a moment, then nodded slow. "Heard about you. She's expecting you at the main house." He stepped aside, swinging the gate open. "Follow the drive. Big white place at the end. Hard to miss." As we passed, he called out, "Word of advice, Dalton. She's fair, but don't mistake fair for soft." I tipped my hat. "Wouldn't dream of it." The road wound up a low hill lined with cottonwoods. The house came into full view. A 2-story mansion of timber and stone, wide porch, tall windows, and the Merrick flag fluttering above the roof. It looked like money built it, but pride kept it standing. I'd seen fine houses before, back east when I was young, but none that carried this kind of strength. It was the kind of place that told you the person inside didn't inherit power. They earned it. A stable hand took our horses as we pulled up. I helped Tommy down, dusted off my coat, and we climbed the porch steps. The door opened before I could knock. A butler stood there, older man, silver hair, eyes sharp. "Mr. Dalton?" "Yes, sir." "Miss Merrick is expecting you in her study. This way, please." I followed him through hallways that smelled of cedar and paper. Paintings lined the walls, landscapes, horses, portraits of men with the same proud eyes. At the end of the hall, he stopped at a tall door and opened it. She was there. Catherine Merrick stood by the window, light from the sunset washing her in gold. She turned when I entered, and for a moment the room went quiet except for the ticking of a clock. She looked different than I remembered, stronger somehow. The tiredness I'd seen in her face that night was gone, replaced by calm authority. But her eyes were the same, steady, blue, unyielding. "Mr. Dalton," she said, and my name sounded different coming from her mouth. "I was hoping you'd come." "Didn't figure I had much reason not to," I answered. "You made quite an offer." She smiled faintly. "I don't make offers I don't mean. Please sit." I did, awkwardly aware of the dust on my boots. Tommy stood near the door, hat clutched tight. Catherine glanced at him and smiled. "You must be Tommy." "Yes, ma'am," he said shyly. "There's a school on the east side of the property," she told him. "You'll start Monday if you like." His face lit up, and I swear my throat tightened. "Yes, ma'am," he said again, barely more than a whisper. Catherine turned back to me. "I meant what I wrote, Mr. Dalton. The ranch is growing fast, and I need someone I can trust to oversee the new grazing grounds near Red Bluff. Men who'll work without greed or deceit are rare these days. You proved what kind of man you are the night you carried me out of that storm." I shifted in my chair. "Didn't do it for reward, ma'am." "I know," she said softly. "That's why you're here." For a moment the fire crackled between us, filling the quiet. She studied me the way a banker might study a contract, but there was something else in her gaze. Respect, maybe, or curiosity. "Will you take the position?" she asked. I looked at Tommy, then back at her. "You offering me honest work? I'll take it." She nodded once, then it settled. She extended her hand. "Welcome to Silver Ridge, Mr. Dalton." I took her hand. It was warm, steady. "Thank you, ma'am." As we shook, the last light of day caught the ruby ring on her finger, the same one I'd seen frozen to her glove that night in the snow. Funny how life circles back. Outside, I could hear the ranch settling down for the night. Horses shifting in their stalls, men calling out across the yard, the wind sighing through the hills. It felt like the West itself was exhaling. When I stepped back out onto the porch, Tommy grabbed my hand. "Pa, we got a home now." I looked at the horizon, where the stars were starting to wake. "Reckon we do, son," I said. "Reckon we do." The first few days at Silver Ridge felt like stepping into another world. Everything ran with a rhythm I hadn't known since I was a young hand driving cattle up from Texas. Steady, sure, and sharp as a knife edge. The men were up before dawn, saddling horses under lantern light. By the time the sun broke over the ridge, the yards rang with hammers, and the smell of hot coffee drifted through the cold air. This wasn't some dusty little outfit scraping by on luck and grit. This was an empire, and every man on it moved like he knew his part. Catherine kept her distance those first days. I saw her riding out with the 4-minute sunrise, her long coat snapping in the wind, hat pulled low, eyes always on the herd. The men called her Miss Merrick or the boss, and they meant it. They might joke quiet when she wasn't around, but when she showed up, the air shifted. Respect came without her asking. She'd earned it somewhere along the line, maybe the hard way. My job was to take charge of the new grazing grounds, a stretch of land west of the river where the fences hadn't been finished yet. It was rough country, good grass, but too much rock and brush for easy work. I took 3 hands and a wagon of supplies and spent daylight hours building line posts, checking for strays, keeping coyotes off the calves. The kind of work I knew best. By the time I rode back each evening, I was sore in every joint, but at peace. There's a comfort in honest labor, something no man can buy or fake. Tommy took to ranch life like he'd been born to it. He'd spend his mornings at the little schoolhouse Catherine had built on the East Hill. The teacher was a widow from back east, kind woman with glasses that always slid down her nose. In the afternoons, Tommy ran errands for the stable hands, feeding the foals and sweeping the stalls. He'd come home covered in dust, but smiling, full of stories about horses and lessons and new friends. Watching him laugh again, it did something to me. Made me remember that maybe the world wasn't done giving after all. I saw Catherine now and then, mostly at meal times in the main hall. She'd sit at the head of the long table, talking business with her foreman. The men respected her mind, even when they didn't understand it. She spoke clear and steady, never raising her voice, but somehow every man in that room heard her. The first time she asked my opinion on a matter of grazing rotation, I nearly dropped my fork. I wasn't used to women asking for a man's thoughts on cattle feed, but she listened, really listened, and nodded like what I said mattered. After supper one night, she stopped me as the men filed out. "Mr. Dalton," she said, "walk with me a moment." We stepped out onto the porch. The moon was bright, spilling silver over the yard. I could hear the night crew down by the barn, their voices low, the creak of harness leather and the jingle of spurs carrying on the wind. "You've settled in quickly," she said. "Been working cattle since I was 12, I told her. Not much new under the sun." She smiled faintly. "Still, not every man rides into Silver Ridge and earns the men's respect in 3 days. They follow you." I shrugged. "Men don't follow words, ma'am. They follow what they see." Her gaze lingered on me for a moment before she looked out across the dark fields. "My father used to say that," she murmured. "He built this place from nothing. After he died, most folks expected it to die too. But I couldn't let that happen." "Nah, you didn't," I said quietly. "No," she said almost to herself. "But it came at a cost. People don't take kindly to a woman telling them what to do. I learned to be harder than I wanted to be." I studied her face in the pale light. There was strength there, yes, but also a kind of tiredness, like someone who carried too much for too long. "You did what you had to," I said. She turned toward me. "You think that makes it right?" "I think right don't always come clean in this world," I answered. "Sometimes you just keep going until it feels less wrong." She let out a slow breath, and for a second I thought I saw something break loose in her, something soft and human beneath all that steel. Then she straightened. "Good night, Mr. Dalton." "Good night, ma'am." As she walked back inside, I stood there on the porch, hands shoved in my pockets, listening to the night settle. A coyote called from the hills, long and lonely. I thought about what she'd said, about the price of holding something together when the world expected you to fail. I'd known that kind of fight once, back when my wife was sick and the doctor said there was no more to be done. You keep pushing, because stopping means admitting defeat. Days turned into weeks. Silver Ridge kept me busy, and I liked it that way. I learned the lay of the land, got to know the men, earned their trust. Some of them were drifters, others old-timers who'd seen too much, but all of them respected a man who worked without complaint. Catherine showed up on the range sometimes, checking progress. She never interfered, just watched with that sharp, measuring gaze. I found myself looking forward to those visits more than I should have. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, she rode out to where we were finishing a fence line. The light hit her hair just right, catching the gold in it. She looked less like a boss then and more like someone the land itself had claimed. I caught her watching me set the last post, and when I turned, she looked away quick. "Fence looks solid," she said. "Should hold through summer," I answered. She nodded. "You do good work, Mr. Dalton." "Only kind, I know." She smiled then, small but real. "That's the best kind." I tipped my hat. "Appreciate that, ma'am." She lingered a moment, eyes tracing the hills beyond. My father always said a fence is more than wood and wire. It's a promise, keeps what matters safe. I looked at her, then at the long stretch of posts glowing orange in the sunset. Reckon that's true. We stood there a while longer, neither of us saying much. The wind tugged at her coat, and somewhere far off, a hawk cried out. I don't know what passed between us in that silence, but when she finally rode off, I felt the air shift, like something had changed, and there was no going back. That night, Tommy asked if we were staying for good. I thought about the road behind us, the work ahead, the strange, steady pull I felt toward the woman who ran this place. Yeah, I said at last, we're home now. Spring came slow that year, the kind that crept across the land instead of bursting all at once. The snows melted into creeks that ran fast and muddy, carving silver lines through the hills. Grass came in thick, the air sweet with sage, and the cattle fattened quick. There's something about that time between cold and heat when a man feels closest to the world, like everything's being born again, himself included. Most mornings, I was out before sunrise. The frost would still cling to the grass, and the horses would snort steam into the dawn. I rode the fence lines, checked the herds, marked strays. My body knew the rhythm of it. Saddle creak, boot against stirrup, the slow sway of a good horse under me. It was work that stripped a man of words and left him honest. Catherine rode out often, too, sometimes alone, sometimes with the accountant or her foreman, but most days she preferred her own company. I'd see her on the far ridge, outlined against the light, hat tilted down, scanning the range like she was taking measure of every blade of grass. She didn't just own that land, she carried it in her bones. The men might have called her boss, but I knew better. She was its keeper, same as me, just with more to lose. By late May, the branding started. We worked from first light till dark. The smell of burnt hair thick in the air, calves bawling, ropes singing through the dust. It was hard, hot work, but good. The kind that makes a man sleep deep. Catherine came down every afternoon, watching from the corral fence. Sometimes she'd roll her sleeves up and lend a hand with the tagging. You could tell she'd done it before. Her movements sure, her voice steady. One evening, after we'd finished the last batch, she brought water and coffee for the hands. I was leaning against the fence, too tired to talk, when she came over. Long day, she said, the kind that makes the next sunrise feel earned, I told her. She smiled at that. My father used to say the same thing. Seems he said a lot worth remembering. She looked off toward the hills. He did. I wish I listened to more of it when he was still around. I didn't know what to say to that. Loss has its own language, and hers sounded a lot like mine. She turned back to me. The men respect you, Jesse. I can see it in the way they work when you're near. I just do my job, ma'am. That's exactly why they follow you. The wind picked up a little, carrying dust across the yard. I could smell rain coming, faint but certain. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders. Storm rolling in from the west, she said. I nodded. We'll need to bring the herd down off the high ground by morning. Already thought of that, she said with a grin. Good to know we're of the same mind. I caught myself smiling back before I could stop it. There was an ease between us then, something unspoken but alive. Not flirtation, just understanding. the kind that don't need explaining. That night, the rain came. It fell hard, drumming on the roof of the bunkhouse and soaking the world clean. I lay awake listening, thinking about the sound of her voice over the storm. It was strange how quick the silence of the plains could fill with someone's presence once you let it. Next morning, the world smelled of wet earth and mesquite. The sky stretched clear again, blue and endless. We drove the herd down slow, mud up to the horses' knees, thunder still grumbling far off. Catherine rode with us, her hat slick with rain, her coat heavy, but she didn't complain once. By the time we reached the lower pasture, the sun had burned through the last of the clouds. When we got back, she called me to the porch. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. "My next?" I said. "In this life, next usually means another day's work." "I mean after," she said. "After the herds are grown. After the season ends. What then?" I thought for a moment. "Never figured on planning that far ahead. Seems like the West has a way of laughing at plans." She nodded slowly, eyes on the horizon. "Maybe, but I still think we ought to dream, even if the wind tears half of it away." "That a lesson from your father, too?" She smiled faintly. "No, that one's mine." There was something in her tone, a mix of strength and weariness. I'd heard that sound before, in my own voice, when I used to talk to my wife about the ranch we never built. I wanted to tell her I understood, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I tipped my hat and said, "You dream, ma'am. I'll make sure it holds." Her eyes met mine, steady as ever. "I believe you will." That night, I rode the fence one last time before turning in. The moon hung low and full, silver in the grass. Somewhere behind me, I could see the lights of the main house, glowing through the dark, warm and steady. I thought about Catherine up there, working late, no doubt. Ledger open, pen scratching. I wondered if she ever let herself rest. When I came back, Tommy was asleep, his school book still open beside him. I sat for a while, watching the fire burn low, listening to the soft crackle of the logs. My hands were sore, my back ached, but my heart felt full. It had been a long time since I'd felt that. Maybe it was the ranch, or the work, or maybe it was her, the woman who rode through storms and built a world from nothing. Whatever it was, it made me believe something I'd nearly forgotten, that a man could find peace even after all the world had taken from him. And for the first time since the night I found her in the snow, I let myself think, not about surviving, but about living. By June, the valley burned gold under the sun. The grass dried, rivers ran low, and the air shimmered like glass above the plains. Every day started before dawn and ended long after the stars came out. The work never quit, but neither did we. That's the way it goes on a ranch. You keep pushing until the season breaks, or you do. I'd been with Silver Ridge near 3 months then, long enough to know its heartbeat. The men trusted me. The horses knew my step, and Catherine's voice had become as familiar as the creak of the barn door. She built something solid out here, not just a ranch, but a way of life that held together through sheer will. And for reasons I couldn't name, she'd started leaning on me more. Meetings, small decisions, trail plans. She'd ask my thoughts. Sometimes she'd listen in silence, eyes on the floor, and then nod like she'd known the answer all along, but needed to hear me say it first. One morning, she sent for me. I found her out by the North Corral, looking over a line of new horses just brought in from Montana. They were fine stock, restless, wild-eyed, the kind that hadn't yet learned men weren't predators. She stood calm among them, hat low, hands gloved, watching the way they moved. "Fine herd," I said, stepping up beside her. "They cost a fortune," she answered, but they'll earn it back come spring. My father always said, horses are the bloodline of a ranch." "Can't argue with that." She glanced at me, a hint of a smile touching her mouth. "You never do argue, do you, Mr. Dalton?" "Only when I think I can win." She laughed then, a sound I hadn't heard enough of. "Well, maybe I need that sometimes. Someone to tell me when I'm wrong." "Seems to me you already know," I said. "You just like to test the echo." She looked away, but I saw the corner of her mouth curve again. "Maybe so." We spent the rest of the morning watching the horses work the ring, our shoulders brushing now and then as we leaned on the rail. Nothing was said that mattered much, but everything between us felt like it did. When she left, the air felt emptier than before. That afternoon, a dust storm rolled in from the west. The sky went copper, the wind screaming over the ridge. We drove the herd into the lower pens and tied down what we could. Dust storms in those parts didn't ask permission. They came like vengeance, turned day to night, and left everything raw. The air went thick, and grit stung my eyes as I ran for the barn. Inside, the horses kicked and snorted, slamming against their stalls. I calmed them one by one, voice low, steady, the way my father taught me. When the worst of it hit, I looked out through the storm and saw her, Catherine, riding hard toward the barns. Her hat was gone, coat snapping behind her like a flag. I cursed under my breath and ran out into the wind. By the time I reached her, her horse was near spent. "What the hell are you doing out here?" I shouted. She pulled the reins tight, dust streaking her face. "Checking the north gate. I thought the wind would tear it loose." I grabbed her bridle. "You'll get yourself killed riding blind in this." She swung down, unsteady on her feet. "So will they," she said, nodding toward the pastures. "Half my herd still out there." I looked into the dark where she pointed. The land vanished into a wall of dust and grit. "You can't save them all." "Maybe not," she said, "but I can try." Before I could argue, she started walking. I went after her, pulling my scarf up over my mouth. The wind hit like a fist, tearing the breath right out of my lungs. We moved slow, bent low, calling to the strays. I could barely see her, just a shadow moving ahead, the hem of her coat whipping through the storm. When we found the first few cattle huddled near a fallen fence, I waved her back. Together, we drove them toward the barn, inch by inch through the howling wind. The world turned red with dust, and the air felt thick enough to choke on. By the time the storm broke, we were coated in dirt, faces raw, eyes burning. The cattle were safe, the gates held. Catherine leaned against the wall of the barn, breathing hard, hair tangled and streaked with grit. I took a step closer, pulling down my scarf. "You're stubborn as they come," I said. She looked up, eyes fierce, even through the grime. "Oh, so are you." We stood there a long moment, just breathing. The silence between us heavy as the dust settling around our boots. Then she smiled, faint but real. "Thank you, Jesse. Just doing what needed done." "That's what my father used to say," she murmured. "Then maybe he was right." She nodded slowly. "He'd have liked you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just tipped my hat and walked out into the fading light. Behind me, I heard her sigh, soft as wind through grass. The days after the storm ran smoother. The herd was safe, the fences stood, and the men started talking about the Dalton touch like I carried luck in my hands. I didn't believe in luck, not really, but I did believe in work and in people who didn't quit when the sky turned cruel. Catherine Merrick was one of those people. And whether I liked it or not, I was starting to measure my own days by her shadow. One evening, she sent for me again. The air had cooled, and the sun dipped low behind the ridge, painting the world in red. I found her in the study, standing by the window, a glass of whiskey untouched beside her. Papers lay scattered across the desk, maps and figures and contracts. She didn't turn when I entered. "Ride's done," I said. "Herd settled. Fence is held." "I heard," she said quietly. "You did well." "I didn't do it alone." "No," she said, turning to face me. "You never do. That's what makes you different." She picked up the glass, swirled it once, and set it down again. "Do you ever miss it, Jesse? The road, the freedom, the kind of life where nothing ties you down?" I thought about it. Sometimes. But freedom's just another word for being nowhere. Out there I was always passing through. Here feels like maybe I stopped. Her eyes softened. "Then I'm glad you did." There was a stillness then, long and easy, filled with things neither of us dared to name. Finally, she looked away. "You should rest. Tomorrow, we start the summer drive." "Yes, ma'am." I left her there, standing in the golden light, the storm's memory still clinging to both of us. That night, I lay awake listening to the coyotes call, and for the first time, the sound didn't feel lonely. It felt like home. The summer drive began under a sunrise so bright it burned the mist right off the valley. We pushed near 3,000 head of cattle east toward the rail line. 30 men, riding and sweating under a sky that never once offered mercy. The dust hung thick behind us, turning the air gold, and the sound of the herd, hooves pounding, calves bawling, men shouting, rolled like thunder across the open land. That kind of work makes or breaks a man, and by the second day, I knew which of my crew were worth their salt. Catherine rode out with us for the first leg. Most ranch owners would have sent their foreman to handle the drive, but she was there in the saddle, hat pulled low, eyes sharp as glass. She didn't say much, didn't have to. The men straightened up just seeing her ride by. She carried command quiet, the way only a few ever learn. We made camp by a creek the first night. The herd settled slow, heads down in the grass, the horses tied and watered. I built a small fire off to the side while the cook got beans and coffee going. Catherine came over, brushing dust from her coat. "How far you think we'll make tomorrow?" she asked. "Yeah, depends on the weather," I said, "and the herd's mood. They get spooked easy in this heat." She nodded. "I trust your judgment." "Appreciate that," I said, "but trust's a heavy thing. You sure you want to carry that?" She smiled faintly. "I already do." The fire popped, throwing sparks into the dark. For a moment, we just listened to the wind moving through the cottonwoods, soft and restless. "My father used to ride every drive," she said after a while. "Said it reminded him what the land cost him." "What did it cost him?" "Everything but his pride." I stirred the fire with a stick. "And you?" Her eyes flicked to mine. "Maybe I'm still paying." I didn't answer. Some truths don't need reply. She stood after a while, brushed her gloves off, and said, "Get some rest, Jesse. Tomorrow's long." Then she turned and walked toward her tent, the light catching the curve of her face before she disappeared into the dark. Next morning, we were in the saddle before the sun cleared the ridge. The drive moved steady. Dust stung the eyes. Sweat turned to salt on the skin, and the rhythm of hooves filled the silence between orders. I rode point most of the day, keeping the lead steers in line. By noon, the air shimmered with heat, and even the wind felt dry enough to crack. The herd started bunching up, restless. I rode down the flank, waving my hat, calling to the boys to spread them out. That's when I heard the crack, sharp, mean, like a gunshot. Then came the bellow. One of the younger steers had caught a rattler hiding in the brush. The noise set the herd off. Panic moved through them like fire. In seconds, 3,000 head were running. "Stampede," I yelled. The ground shook. Dust exploded into the sky. Men screamed orders, horses reared, ropes snapped. I rode hard along the lead, cutting left, trying to turn the herd. My horse lunged, foam at his mouth, hooves pounding. The world turned noise and motion, nothing but fear and instinct. I could see Catherine on the far side, riding straight into the chaos, her hair loose, face set hard. "Get out of there," I shouted, but the wind took my words. She kept going, angling her horse toward the front. Damn full courage. I pushed through after her, cutting off a steer that nearly knocked her down. I got close enough to grab her reins. "You can't outstare a stampede," I yelled. She turned her head, eyes blazing. "Then help me stop it." We rode side by side, driving the point steers in a wide arc. Slowly, painfully, the herd began to turn, the thunder of hooves easing as the dust settled. When it was over, we sat there breathing hard, surrounded by trembling cattle and men too shocked to speak. "You're out of your damn mind," I said. She looked at me, chest heaving. "Maybe, but it worked." Barely. She smiled, and for a second, all the fear and fury in me broke apart. "You could have been killed," I said. "So could you." I wanted to stay angry, but I couldn't. The truth was, she'd faced that storm with more steel than most men I'd ridden with. I reached over, brushed the dust from her shoulder, and said quietly, "Don't make a habit of it." "No promises," she said, and that small grin of hers came back, the one that always made it hard to breathe. We camped early that night. The men were bone-tired, nerve-shot. I walked the perimeter after supper, listening to the night hum. Catherine sat by the fire, staring into the flames. I joined her without a word. After a while, she said, "You ever think about leaving all this behind? Just disappearing into the hills somewhere?" I thought about it. Used to. Not anymore. Why not? Because I finally found a place that feels like mine. She looked over, eyes soft in the firelight. "Silver Ridge?" I hesitated. "Something like that." She didn't press, just nodded, turned her gaze back to the fire, and said, "Good. Then we'll build it right." That night, the air cooled, stars bright enough to cut through the dark. I lay awake under the wagon, watching the sky turn slow, the herd breathing steady beyond the camp. My body ached. My hands were raw, but I felt alive. Catherine Merrick had risked her life for the herd, same as any man out there, and I'd seen something in her I couldn't unsee, courage that burned clean through the dust and fear. By dawn, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever bound us had stopped being chance. Out there on that trail, under a sky big enough to swallow every sin and secret. Something had changed for good. When we finally drove the herd to the rail yards, it felt like the whole world exhaled. The station lay wide and loud against the prairie, smoke from the engines curling up like ghosts. Men hollered, cattle bawled, iron clanged against iron. We'd been on the trail 3 long weeks, and every bone in my body felt worn thin. But the herd was delivered. The count came up right, and the buyers were pleased. For a ranch hand, that's as close to victory as you get. Catherine oversaw the sale herself. She stood there on the platform, hair pinned up, coat dusted clean, her voice calm while she handled the numbers. The men from the rail company looked her over, like they couldn't decide whether to be impressed or afraid. They handed her a check so large, I didn't dare ask the amount. When it was done, she turned to me and said simply, "We did well, Jesse. I tip my hat." "You mean you did?" Her eyes held mine. "No, we." Then she handed the foreman the papers and walked off toward her horse, leaving me standing there with that word echoing in my head. We made camp that night near the ridge road. The air was cool, clean, the stars thick as dust across the sky. Most of the men got drunk on whiskey in relief, singing songs that carried out across the plains. I kept to myself near the fire, rolling a smoke and listening to the night settle. Catherine came by after a while, quiet as always. "You don't drink?" she asked, lowering herself to a crate across from me. "Used to," I said. "Then I learned some memories don't drown easy." She studied me, firelight flickering in her eyes. "Your wife?" I nodded. "Died 6 years back. Fever took her quick, left me and the boy with more ghosts than comfort." "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Don't be. I got lucky to have her as long as I did." For a while neither of us spoke. The fire cracked, sparks floating up into the dark. Then she said, "My father died out here too. Not from fever, from pride. He rode out in a storm to prove he could still break a horse at 50. Didn't come back." I looked across the fire at her. "That why you ride through blizzards now? To prove you're tougher than ghosts?" Her lips twitched. "Maybe. Or maybe I just don't know how to stop fighting." I nodded slowly. "That makes 2 of us." She smiled then, small, tired, but real. "Maybe that's why we understand each other." When she left, I sat a long time staring into the fire, hearing her words roll through my head like slow thunder. Understand each other. In all my years wandering from one job to the next, I'd never had someone say that and mean it. By the time we reached Silver Ridge again, the hills were burning green with summer. The air smelled of rain and fresh grass, and the men were in good spirits, pockets heavy from pay. Catherine rode ahead, her posture straight as ever, but there was an ease in her I hadn't seen before. When the main house came into view, she slowed, turned her horse, and waited for me to pull up beside her. "Feels good to be home," she said. "Reckon it does." "You did fine work out there. I don't forget that." I nodded. "Neither do I forget who gave me the chance." Her gaze lingered on me a moment, then drifted toward the horizon. "You ever think about the kind of man you were before all this?" "All the time," I said. Then I stopped. Ain't much sense in looking backward when the trail keeps moving forward." She looked at me then, really looked, the way folks do when they're weighing something deep. "You might be the first man I've met who doesn't want to change the past." I made peace with mine. I said quietly, "Don't mean it stopped following me." That evening, after the herd was penned and the men turned in, I walked out behind the stables. The moon was high, the night still. Catherine stood by the fence, her hands resting on the top rail, looking out over the range. I hesitated a moment, then joined her. "Hard to sleep after a drive," I said. "I know," she answered. "Feels like the ground still moves beneath you." "Yeah, takes a while for it to settle." We stood there in silence. Crickets hummed. A coyote called somewhere down in the valley. Then she said, "I never thanked you for the storm, the drive, everything." "You don't owe me thanks." She turned her head. "Maybe not, but I owe you honesty. I didn't bring you here just because you saved my life, Jesse. I brought you here because this ranch needs more than men who follow orders. It needs someone who remembers why the land matters, someone who won't sell his soul for $1. I looked out across the dark fields. "You sure you're talking about me?" She smiled faintly. "I am." The words hung between us, heavy and warm. I wanted to say something, anything, but every word that came to mind felt too small. Instead, I said, "You've built something fine here, Catherine. It's worth standing for." "I know," she said, "and that's why I'm asking you to stand with me." I met her eyes. "You mean as partners?" She didn't answer right away, just held my gaze, then nodded once. "If you're willing." I breathed out slow. "That's a mighty big word, partner." "It's the right one," she said. The moon caught the edge of her hair, and for a moment she looked almost unreal. Half light, half shadow, strong and unafraid. I reached out, took her hand, rough against smooth, dust against silk. "Then it settled," I said. "My partners." She didn't let go right away. "Welcome home, Jesse." I tipped my hat. "Glad to be here, ma'am." When she walked back toward the house, I stayed by the fence, staring out at the land stretching wide and silent under the stars. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was just passing through. That night, I dreamed of snow melting into grass, of a woman's voice carried on the wind, saying my name like it had weight again. And when I woke before dawn, I knew, whatever came next, I'd face it here, with her. Summer burned itself out slow, and Silver Ridge settled into a rhythm so steady, it almost felt eternal. The days stretched long and hot, the night soft with cricket song and the smell of cut hay. The men worked hard, but there was laughter now, a lightness that hadn't been there before. Maybe it was the drive's success, or maybe it was Catherine's presence, strong enough to hold the whole ranch together, yet softer these days, like she finally allowed herself to breathe. For me, it was peace of a kind I'd never known. The morning started with coffee on the porch, the sky bleeding gold over the hills. I'd watch Tommy trot off to the schoolhouse, lunch tin swinging from his hand, his laughter echoing across the yard. That sound alone was worth every mile I'd ever ridden. I'd taken to riding the far pastures alone after breakfast, checking the water holes, watching the herd. Sometimes I'd see Catherine in the distance, her horse a dark shape against the bright land, her coat trailing behind like a banner. We didn't talk much out there, didn't need to. A wave, a nod, a moment of quiet recognition, that was enough. One evening in late August, she sent word for me to meet her at the windmill by the North Ridge. When I got there, the sun was just touching the horizon, setting the whole sky on fire. She was waiting, hair pulled back, gloves off, eyes sharp. "Ranch looks strong," I said as I dismounted. Never seen the cattle this fat. It should, she said. We've done good work. We walked along the fence line, the dry grass whispering around our boots. You've done more than keep this place alive, I told her. You've made it something to be proud of. She smiled, but it faded quick. You make it sound like it's finished. Looks that way to me. Nothing out here ever stays finished but to you, she said softly. There's always another storm coming. The wind shifted, warm and restless. I could feel what she meant. Not a real storm, not yet, but something brewing in the air between us. What's bothering you? I asked. She stopped looking out over the hills. You ever notice how the land keeps what it wants? Swallows up the weak, leaves the strong standing. But even the strong don't last forever. My father built this place to survive him. I'm not sure I can do the same. You already have, I said. Every man here would follow you to the end of the range and back. She turned, eyes glinting in the last of the light. Would you? The question hit harder than I expected. I reckon I already have, I said. We stood there, the silence stretching long between us. Then she said quietly, there's talk in town about the rail company buying up land west of here. They're pushing hard, paying men to sell. I turned them down, but I don't think they're done asking. What do they want with it? Control, she said flatly. They're planning a spur line through the valley. They think the land's theirs for the taking. I felt the old anger stir in me, the one that never really died. Rail men don't care who they crush, long as the tracks stay straight. She nodded. I know what they're capable of. My father fought them once. I may have to again. Then you won't stand alone. She looked at me then, and I swear the setting sun caught her eyes just right. They burned like fire on the horizon. I know, she said softly. The windmill creaked above us, turning slow in the dying breeze. Somewhere below, the cattle lowed, restless in the heat. I didn't know it then, but that was the last quiet night we'd have for a while. The next week, word came from town. A lawyer from the rail company had shown up, waving papers and promises. Men who'd worked our fence lines started disappearing. Some took cash, others just left without a word. Fences were cut, a water trough poisoned. One morning, I found a steer dead with a bullet between its eyes. Catherine called a meeting in the main hall. The men gathered, hats in hand, the air thick with dust and unease. She stood at the head of the room, posture straight, voice clear. The Merrick land is not for sale, she said. Not to them, not to anyone. Some of the men nodded, others looked to the floor. One, a drifter named Rourke, spat tobacco and said, That's easy for you to say, ma'am. You got money. The rest of us got mouths to feed. Catherine didn't flinch. And this ranch feeds them. I pay fair, and you all know it. You sell to the rail. You sell your future for a coin that won't buy you a roof next winter. Rourke shrugged. Roof don't mean much if a man's stomach's empty. I stepped forward. You walk off this land, Rourke. Don't bother coming back. The rail won't care if you starve. He glared at me, then spat again, missing my boot by an inch. You talk big for a man who don't own nothing. Maybe, I said, but I damn sure earned what I stand on. The room went still. Catherine's voice cut through it like a blade. That's enough. Anyone who wants to leave can. But if you stay as Merrick men. No half measures. Rourke muttered something under his breath and stormed out. Two others followed, The rest stayed. After the meeting, I found her on the porch, staring out into the dark. "You think they'll be back?" I asked. "Not Rourke," she said, "but the men he talked to in town might be. Then we'll be ready." She looked at me, tired but unbroken. "I hope you're right, Jesse, 'cause this time it won't just be a storm." I leaned on the rail beside her, the night wind cool against my face. "Then let it come," I said. "Silver Ridge can take it." She didn't answer, but her hand brushed mine where it rested on the wood, just for a moment, barely there, but enough. That night, as I walked back to my quarters, the horizon flashed with distant lightning. I could smell rain on the wind, sharp and heavy, the kind that brings change, whether you're ready for it or not. It came 3 nights later. Not rain, not thunder, men. The wind had turned mean by sundown, howling across the ridge like something alive. I was on the south line, checking the water troughs, when I caught the first glint of lanterns moving through the dark. 3, maybe 4 riders, heading slow but steady toward the main barn. I knew that kind of silence. It wasn't work, it was warning. I spurred my horse and rode hard, the night air cold in my lungs. By the time I reached the yard, the dogs were barking and the men were stirring from the bunkhouse. One of the riders had already fired. Gunshot cracked the air, scattering the horses in their pens. I jumped off, shouting orders. "Get to cover. Don't let him near the barn." Catherine came running from the porch, rifle in hand, coat thrown over her nightdress. "What's happening?" "Railmen," I said, "and they've come to finish what they started." Her face didn't change, only her stance. Shoulders squared, jaw set. "Then we finish it first." The next few minutes were chaos and fire. The riders burst through the lower gate, shooting wild, trying to drive us off. One of them threw a lantern into the hay shed. Flames caught fast, lighting the yard in gold and red. The heat hit like a wall. I fired once, saw a man fall, then ducked behind a trough as bullets tore into the fence beside me. "Jesse," Catherine shouted from the porch. "The east barn. They're heading for the stock pens." I grabbed a fresh round and sprinted across the yard. The fire behind me threw long shadows, flickering over the dirt. 2 men on horseback were driving the gate wide, trying to run the cattle out. I shot one clean through the leg. His horse bolted, dragging him into the dark. The other turned his gun on me, but before he could fire, Catherine's rifle barked from behind. He dropped where he stood. Smoke rolled across the yard. Thick and choking, the men of Silver Ridge, those who'd stayed, rallied fast. We formed a line, driving the intruders back toward the ridge. There was shouting, gunfire, the clash of hooves on stone. It didn't last long. Cowards like that never fight once they realize the land won't bend. Within minutes, they broke and fled into the night. When it was over, the yard was a mess of smoke and silence. The hay shed burned low. Half the fence gone. 2 men were hurt, 1 bad. I helped carry him into the bunkhouse, then stepped outside to breathe. The stars were gone, the sky black with ash. Catherine stood by the fence, rifle hanging loose at her side. I walked to her, boots crunching in the cinders. "You all right?" I asked. She nodded, eyes on the horizon. "They'll be back. Then so will we." She looked at me, the firelight painting her face in golden shadow. "You could leave, Jesse. Take your boy. Start over somewhere the fights are smaller." I shook my head. "No, ma'am. This is our fight now." Something in her eyes softened. "You're a fool. Most men are when they care." She smiled, tired but proud. Then I suppose I'll keep a fool at my side. We watched the last flames die together. The wind eased, carrying the smell of rain that hadn't yet come. Around us, the men moved quiet, rebuilding what they could. Every strike of hammer and shovel sounded like a promise. Silver Ridge would stand. The next morning, we buried the dead one from the other side, the man Catherine shot. She insisted on it, said even enemies deserved a name over the dirt. I helped dig, and when it was done, we stood silent a moment. He chose his side, I said. So did we, she answered. For weeks after, the ranch worked harder than ever. We rebuilt fences, redug the wells, patched the burned timbers. The men grew tighter, prouder. Catherine paid every hand double that month, out of her own pocket. The railmen never came again, though I heard rumors they sold their rights up north. Maybe they finally realized there are places money can't buy. One evening, near the end of that long season, I sat with Catherine on the porch. The sky was quiet, the fields silver in the moonlight. Tommy was asleep inside, and the only sound was the crickets and the low hum of wind through the grass. "You ever think about that night?" she asked. "Every time I smell rain," I said. She smiled faintly. "You saved me again." "Other way around, far as I see it." She turned her head, eyes catching the light. "Maybe we saved each other." We sat there a long while, not talking, just watching the land breathe under the stars. The fire in the hearth behind us burned low, and I thought about the road that brought me there, the storm, the woman in the snow, the letter that changed everything. "I used to think decency didn't count for much," I said. "Too many men took what they wanted and left the rest to freeze. But maybe it's the only thing that lasts out here." She reached over, her hand finding mine, fingers strong, sure. "It's what built this place," she said. I looked at her then, the woman who had turned a dying ranch into a kingdom of her own making. And I saw not the stranger I'd found in the snow, but the partner I've been searching for all my life. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain from far off. I squeezed her hand once and said quietly, "Reckon the West finally gave us something worth keeping." She smiled, eyes on the horizon. "Reckon it did." And as the first drops began to fall, soft and slow against the porch roof, I knew that for the first time since the blizzard, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was home